Absolutely. So let's talk about your business. So walk us through, you've now opened your agency. What was that like for you? Was that a scary time in your life, or were you just thrilled from day one?
I would say a little bit of both. I think day one I was thrilled. Day three I was terrified, and then day four the process started all over again. I do always say that I feel blessed to have a co-founder because I do see a lot of individuals that are solo entrepreneurs, and I have so much respect for it because I think a lot of taking the scary part out was to have a partner that jumped off the cliff at the same time, right? You have someone to look at and say, like, am I losing it? And they can confirm or deny, which is always helpful. When we started the company, I was I was 27 when I started Scoutlab with my co-founder, Caitlin Barclay, who's also just, I think, a month younger than I am. And we were living in New York. Like I mentioned, we had a lot of these just egregious brand faux pas happening left and right. And we had both had a lot of, I would say, early success in building brands and building companies, specifically in the digital age. We understand what it takes to not only have a strong story, but to build and scale a brand on the internet, which it sounds kind of obvious, but there's so many companies out there that really forget that they are one company. So much of what they have, so much of what they do will be internal politics. So one side of your company won't talk to the other side. And then, as a result, your customers don't know what you stand for, why you exist. And the same thing has happened with digital. A lot of people will say, well, I'm not a tech company. Or I don't need a website, or, any of these ridiculous things. And, after this year, I think everyone knows they need a website. But all of these ancillary channels that I think were very mysterious to a lot of brands needed to be codified into a really easy way to understand how to build and scale a brand. And so that's what we set to work doing. We created something called the brand sprint, which was taking product sprint methodology. For anyone who's familiar with building technical products, we borrowed this kind of sprint stand-up model from that because we both had experience in tech and found it was really effective in decision making, and then applied that to creative work so that we were able to really work with teams, specifically mostly tech companies in the beginning, but now, we work across CPG, fashion, food. We work across a ton of different categories, and the process still works effectively for all of them. It's just a matter of making sure that we're thinking holistically about a problem and about a customer, and not in silos, which is so often of what we see. So that was a little bit of our impetus. It was quite terrifying when we first put we call it, I guess, our MVP, our minimal viable product of our brand sprint. When we initially put it out, I don't think we necessarily expected it to take off. We got our first client, and of course we're thrilled, but also worked ourselves to the bone, just trying to deliver our first kind of pieces of what we had. And then our second client was Adidas, which was kind of shocking. So they came to us, they got referred, they heard about the brand sprint, and they wanted to work with us. And I think that was a little bit of a shock because we initially were planning on working with smaller brands. And what we realized very quickly was that larger brands need direction too. They want to be nimble. They want to be digital. They want all of the same things that small brands need. It's just a matter of scale. So that was kind of an interesting and terrifying time.
Wow. I think that it's so interesting to see how oftentimes you kind of set course as an entrepreneur and you think you're headed one way, and then you end up going, 90 degrees the other way, completely unintended. But it's really what your destiny was.
Yeah, you honestly never know. And you'll get advice from so many people. I remember early on, we got a lot of advice that we needed to deeply specialize and focus on doing this one specific thing really well. And we debated over it and, talked about it, and ultimately decided that our business was more diverse than that to build a holistic brand, you do need more than just a really incredible design discipline, right? You need to understand communications and social media. And ultimately that ended up being what helped our business thrive during the pandemic was the fact that we were diversified. And had we taken advice from other people, we might not even still be here today.
What about your startup hacks that you feel that were really helpful to you in the early days when you were starting your company, or maybe even now, that saved you time, money, gained a competitive edge, helped you with efficiencies, whatever it may have been, where you feel that you're working smart and it's been impactful for you? What would you say would be like your top 3?
So I would say number 1 would be, when working with a co-founder specifically, creating rules of the road up front. So establishing your norms. How do you interact? What hours are you going to work? How are you getting paid? Is it equally? Having those hard conversations sooner. Maybe it sounds a little bigger than a hack and slightly obvious, but it's something that we decided early on in our business to do, and saved us so much time and so much money in the long run because we were really aligned. So it's something I would recommend is to anyone that has a co-founder going into it, really align yourself with what are those rules of the road. Number 2 is, I would say, get a coach. I know coaching at times can feel like it's out of the budget or, something that's extra. But if you're an entrepreneur, you're responsible for your own growth. There's no one at the end of the day who's going to ask you, if you're growing or if you're doing better, or work with you on your blind spots. So working with a coach is a really good way to make sure that you're holding yourself accountable to you and to your business. And then 3, I would say, maybe this is a little bit more of a tool, but calm.com is something I use. I use the app, but certainly you can use any app. Meditation has been a really incredible tool for me. I'm also ADD, so meditation is just key to my overall well-being. But I find that it helps you build resilience and lessen the emotional impact of that reactivity that can happen from day to day when you're starting a new business. So any type of meditation practice, I would certainly recommend.
Those are all really 3 very good suggestions. Thank you. So I have one last question, because unfortunately we're running low on time. Kind of a fun question and something a little different. And that is kind of the meaning of success. A lot of us founders, we set off on our own respective journeys for our own reasons. And there's kind of an end point that I think we all want to attain, whether it's financial freedom or whatever it may be. What would you say if you were to look back, that when you set off on this journey, that what would be your definition of success, or how has it changed?
I guess two-part answer to that. One is that I think creative freedom for me has always been really important in making sure that I'm able to focus my energy, my talents, my skills set in this life on the things that I feel like are most important. And certainly that shifts over time. And so being able to maintain that kind of, like I said, creative freedom is really important. In terms of success for a business, I would agree. That's something that everyone can kind of measure on their own. But I would say feeling truly fulfilled and enjoying what you do is so, so important. I think, we all have these, big goals or big dreams, but ultimately if we are not enjoying the ride or learning and growing in the process, it's not, no matter what numbers you hit, is it even success at the end of the day? And so I am also thinking from that perspective of, is it something that is ultimately fulfilling? And for me, being an entrepreneur is the most fulfilling path that I could have chosen.
Well, I agree. Thank you so much, Willow. It was really great to have you on the show, and I think your insights were really valuable to the audience. If people would like to learn more about your company and the work that you do you want to share a website?
Yeah, they can head over to scoutlab.com. Scoutlab, and you can also find us on Instagram.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you. Thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And tune in next week for another episode of Startup Hacks, and where we get to interview another fabulous female founder on her entrepreneurial journey. We'll see you then. Thank you for joining Startup Hack. Tune in next week for more interviews. We have another great show you won't want to miss on the secret female founder strategies that can save you time and money when building your business. This podcast is brought to you by Women Entrepreneurs Global, the first startup studio and digital do-it-yourself startup platform for women. For more information on our guests, this podcast, and many other female founder programs, please visit womenentrepreneurs.global. I'm your host, Fernanda Carapina. See you next week.